He was once a substitute teacher, elementary level. And he said he got thrown into a 4th grade class one day, and the instructions he had from the teacher who was out sick weren't clear to him. They were doing, I think he said they were doing addition of fractions that day. And she had instructions about using cubes and doing this and all that, and he stood up in front of the classroom and he said, you know, I don't understand this. He didn't understand it, the specific method for introducing it. And a couple of students who didn't understand it tried to help him, and it just kind of went nowhere. And finally he said, you know, I'm not going to be able to help you this way. Let me show you how I add fractions. And he said, I love this. He said, on that day, 5 students in the classroom said, oh, now I get it. And it's because he approached it from a different angle. So you have a resource for that, and it is your teacher's lounge. All right, those are the 3 metaphors. What is the one statement I want you to retain? It is not, that's exactly right. It is not about getting the answer right. It's all about your students communicating mastery of the concept to you. Let me leave you with one story that hopefully hits that point home. I think all of us in this classroom can identify on one hand the great teachers that we have experienced in our education, kindergarten through college. We've had 5 or less great teachers, right? Would you agree with that? And I think all of us would certainly relish being a digit on one of our students' hands. We want to be a great teacher to at least one of our students in our classroom every year, right? One of my 5 great teachers was a biology teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Woodruff. He was a great teacher. He was a great communicator. The first day of school, he stood up in front of the class, somewhat intimidating actually. He said, class, it is very difficult to get an A in my class. I want to tell you that the first day. And then he had this number, academic numbers. See this number? You have to score above this number to get an A in my class. Now some of you are going to work very hard this year, the hardest you've ever worked in a classroom, and you're going to come right up to that number but not over it. I'm here to tell you, you will not get an A in my class. So please do not come crying to me on the last day of school when this happens. I've made it very clear to you what you can expect from me. And then he started teaching. And about 3/4 of the way through the year, he taught us some, we spent a week on standard deviation. A difficult concept for me. And at the beginning of that week, he said, all right, here's where we're going to go. Once again, great communicator. This is what you can expect. Here's where we're going to go. By the way, on Friday, I'm going to give you the results of an experiment. I'm going to give you the whole hour period. All you get is scratch paper and a pencil. You're going to do the computational work. If you come up with the standard deviation number and you can show me how you did your work, you're going to get an automatic A in my class regardless of what you do the rest of the school year. Now that got everybody's attention in the classroom. I came that day packed to the 6. I had 3 number 2 pencils in my pocket and I was ready to go. Walked in, he raised the screen, revealed the results of the experiment. We all started to tear into our computations. We only had an hour. It was going to take that long to get it. Just going through. About 45 minutes in, I just happened to look up and notice that I had made a computational error 5 minutes into the hour. Oh, first lesson I learned that day, always check your work as you go. Communicate that to your students. Well, I remember sitting there, I kind of flopped back in my chair. I think I said something like, well, darn, this is not good. And I sat there and I really wanted to have an answer from my teacher. We had a great relationship. I wanted to show him that I appreciated his work, and I just wanted an answer that was somewhat close at least. And I remembered that earlier in the week he said, you know, if you graph out the results of an experiment, it's a slope, and if it slopes this way, it's a positive number, and this way it's negative, and depending upon, you know, its angle, where the number is. And if it's somewhat random, then that usually means that the answer is somewhere between, I think he said, negative 0.15 and positive 0.15. Now I had 15 minutes to go. I had nothing to do, so I built a graph and started graphing out the results. And it was somewhat random on my page, and so I looked at it, and I said, okay, 0.14. I'm just going to write that answer. Now Mr. Woodruff is going around the classroom during this time. He stops by my desk and he says, Bob, tell me how you got that answer. Ooh, good question for a teacher, huh? tell me how you got that answer. And I thought, this is my chance. I'm going to kind of snow him a little bit, see if I can get away with it. Said, well, Mr. Woodruff, I made a computational error here 5 minutes in. You can clearly see it. Yes, Bob, I can. Well, I didn't recognize it till 45 minutes in, so one of the things you certainly have taught me is to check my work as I go. But in the meantime, I decided to graph out the results, and based on my analysis of the graph, I've determined that the answer is 0.14. And he kind of paused for a moment. He looked me right in the eye, and he said, you guessed. And I said, well, yeah, basically. You know, I was kind of, yeah, I did. And he said, okay, he's moving on. And I'm just kind of sitting there, just thinking about it. A good friend of mine just turned in his page. He was coming back to his desk to collect his things to go to the next class. He stops by my desk. He looks down, sees 0.14. And he says, have you turned in your page? I said, no, I'm not going to turn it in. I'm just going to do an incomplete. He says, no, turn it in. No, you know, I'm not. No, turn it in. And he was insistent. I said, why? He says, because you got the answer dead on. Now, let me ask you a question. What grade did I get in Woody's class that year, in Mr. Woodruff's class that year? I got a B+. And do you know why I got a B+? No, I got a B+ because that is the grade that I earned. You with me? I got a B+ because that's the grade I earned. He was very emphatic. He said, if you can show the work, you get an automatic A only if you communicate how you got the answer. And guessing is not getting the answer, it's guessing.
Okay.
He is one of my 5 great teachers because he taught me a very important lesson that day. More important than lucking into life is earning it. We all get lucky sometimes, but more important is earning it. And that's why we started with a comic, and I want to finish with a comic. And I really want to encourage you to dwell on this a little bit, okay? Let me set this up a little bit. This is a Peanuts comic. It's Charlie Brown and Linus. Now, Linus is in love with his teacher, Miss Otmar. He's been in love with her since the first day of school. He admires her. He thinks that she's really good. And she wanted the kids to bring some eggshells to make an igloo village. And he keeps forgetting to bring it in. And if you pick up from there, he says, good grief, I forgot the eggshells again. Miss Otmar will be so upset. She wanted us to bring eggshells to school to make an igloo village. And then he says to Charlie Brown, Miss Otmar takes her job very seriously. She doesn't even like to be called a teacher. She prefers to be called an educator. And Charlie Brown says, wow, how serious can you get? Now, behind that humor is a very important decision for all of you in your teaching profession. And that is to understand the difference between being a teacher and being an educator. It's not about getting the answer right. It's all about your students communicating mastery of a concept. And you hold in front of you every day the next generation of leaders of this country, right? All of us should aspire and want to be one of the top 5 teachers for our students in our classroom, and we should do that every year, every day, right? Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate your attention.